Welcome to Moray's Muse. This is your source for non-AI generated history. My name is Moray, and I just want to thank you guys so much for all the subscribers joining us. So welcome. Today we're talking about Antoninus Pius. Antoninus Pius is one of those underrated rulers of Roman history. So many people want to explore Caesar or Marcus Aurelius. Nobody talks about how Antoninus Pius created an unprecedented time of peace during the Roman Empire. And so many people associate his achievements with Marcus Aurelius, which is wrong. So we're kicking it back to the Roman Empire today, and we're discovering how Antoninus Pius created such a time of peace during the Pax Romana. Antoninus Pius was born in 86 AD. His father, who served as consul, passed away in 89 BC, and Antoninus Pius was raised by his grandfather. The family's roots were traced back to Nemes. Let's talk about Antoninus' marriage. Antoninus Pius was married to Faustina the Elder. Pius and Faustina the Elder had 4 children. One of those children was Faustina the Younger, who is Marcus Aurelius' wife. And whilst this is one of our earliest videos, you guys should check out our Marcus Aurelius' video. The way Marcus Aurelius treated Faustina the Younger was something out of a rom-com. When Faustina the Elder dies in 141 AD, Antoninus Pius grieved so heavily. He really loved his wife. Now, it's funny because whilst Antoninus Pius did a lot after Faustina the Elder's death to commemorate her, Antoninus Pius never married. He had a live-in partner, which was quite rare for Rome. You know, he had a companion, and he starts dating, if we should say, a freedwoman of Faustina the Elder. So he basically starts dating Faustina the Elder's former slave, and he wouldn't marry her. Let's talk about Antoninus Pius and Hadrian's relationship, because Hadrian is who Antoninus Pius was adopted by. Hadrian, if you watch our Hadrian video, he had no children, no heirs. So like all of these videos we do, mostly all of these videos, Antoninus Pius rose through the ranks in his career. Hadrian adopts Antoninus Pius as his heir in 138 AD. However, the condition was that Antoninus Pius had to adopt Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Verus, who passed away once Antoninus Pius was in his reign wearing the purple. Hadrian passes away and Antoninus Pius becomes Augustus. Antoninus Pius convinces the Senate to deify Hadrian, and Antoninus Pius wants Marcus Aurelius to break off his engagement to Sionia Fabia and marry his daughter Faustina the Younger. It's quite interesting, actually. Marcus Aurelius was already engaged and he fell in love with a woman from an arranged marriage. Here's the thing, Antoninus Pius was great. His reign of 138 to 161 AD was the most peaceful we had seen in Rome. Antoninus Pius was driven by art. He wanted to build theatres and temples. He believed in philosophy deeply, and he didn't undo any of Hadrian's work. He retained Hadrian's structure for the empire. Now then, let's talk about Antoninus Pius and his peacekeeping per se. Why were there no military campaigns? Antoninus Pius never even approached a Roman battlefield. Now, the Antonine Plague caused quite a few issues. There are disturbances in Britain and Mauritania and Judah, but obviously they would be in Britain. I mean, the Gallo-Romans were obviously going to act up. Boudica was only, I think, 50 years prior, so they'd remember that. And whilst seeing trouble in Scotland, Antoninus Pius refuses military intervention, and instead of wanting military intervention in Scotland, Antoninus Pius wants to build the Antonine Wall. And the Antonine Wall really was there to serve political purpose. While Antoninus Pius may have been a peacekeeper, he still wanted to elude that he was a big bad guy, even though his personal beliefs were against that. Whilst Antoninus Pius refused military challenges, he still had problems. Historia Augusta talks about 2 plots that Antoninus Pius faced. And unlike the Catalan conspiracy, which happened, I reckon it happened about 300 years prior, Antoninus Pius refused to execute any of the conspirators. There were disturbances in Dacia, and the empire still had problems. However, Antoninus Pius handled this with a lot more peace than some of his predecessors and future successors. Another thing about Antoninus Pius, he never wanted to leave Italy. Hadrian, his predecessor, was obsessed with traveling. Antoninus Pius didn't want to leave Italy, didn't want to leave his home. And this style of leadership has been praised because even now we see people like Keir Starmer who spend more time abroad than at home sorting the problems. We really need leaders who sort out their own country's issues. What I'm trying to say, Antoninus Pius, by staying in Italy, was quite proactive at sorting the issues within the confines of Rome, realistically. And that was a very good way to lead, considering so many of his predecessors and successors were busy conquering elsewhere rather than sorting internal problems. For example, Antoninus Pius was very much into building at home in Rome. He was very keen on having clean drinking water for his citizens. And Antoninus Pius as well, he was excellent in a crisis. For example, we can see there have been many natural disasters over Antoninus Pius's reign, and in order to help the cities, he refused tax collection. So that's a rarity. Antoninus Pius was a very religious man. The cult that he observed was the cult of the Great Monk. And Antoninus Pius also was a worshipper of Mithras, who he patronized. Pius and his legal reform. Antoninus Pius carefully cultivated the image of the magistrate of the res publica. He is credited with the significant act of splitting the treasury. And actually, the Historia Augusta recounts that Antoninus Pius himself was quite stingy, or maybe we call it frugal. But Antoninus Pius had a vast fortune, obviously, like any emperor would. Antoninus Pius was also well known for helping slaves. Antoninus Pius was all about the liberty of the freedman. Antoninus Pius favored libertas, and he penalized the killing of a slave. So during Antoninus Pius's reign, slaves had gotten quite a few of their rights back. He also stopped female slaves ending up in prostitution, so he was about protecting sex workers. Another thing Antoninus Pius did was that he wanted all citizens of Rome to be seen as equal if they were persecuted. When I say this, persecuted in a court of law. Let's talk about Antoninus Pius and his celebrations of Rome's 900th anniversary. Magnificent games were held, and Antoninus Pius, who is a really stingy emperor, found it really hard to justify the price and the deaths of all these exotic animals being killed and fought for entertainment. However, he needed to do it because it would boost his popularity, bred in circuses after all. Antoninus Pius was so stingy that the purity of the denarii went down from 89% down to 83%. He was very fiscally responsible. Antoninus Pius was a close companion of the Jewish community. He's mentioned multiple times in the Talmud. During Antoninus Pius, we can start to see that China and Rome were forming ties. The first ever ambassadors from Rome went to China. We can see this from Roman coins in Zion. Antoninus Pius passes away in 156 AD. He reaches the age of 70. And how he died was pretty peculiar. Antoninus Pius was at his ancestral estate, and he consumed Alpine cheese and got a bout of food poisoning that ended him, according to modern historians. So, on that note, I think it's about 22 years that Antoninus Pius ended up ruling Rome, and what a remarkable rulership or governorship that was. I mean, you never hear of peacekeepers in Roman times. Saying that as well, I think that Marcus Aurelius is associated with a lot of the work that Antoninus Pius put in, because Marcus Aurelius is quite trendy in the 2020s. Meditations is a hugely sold out book, and people go towards Stoicism and assume that Marcus Aurelius is this peaceful character, when Marcus Aurelius was the last of the good emperors, and Antoninus Pius had created a great base for his adopted son. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you for all the lovely comments. Bye bye!